This is the Contractors Corner podcast series from Solar Power World. Well, welcome to another edition of Contractors Corner podcast. I am Solar Power World Editor-in-Chief Kelly Pickerel, and before we get started with today's interview with Primoris Renewable Energy, I thought it would be fun to bring in a fellow Solar Power World editor, Billy Ludt, to talk a little bit about representation in the solar industry. So hello, Billy.
Hey, Kelly, and hello, everyone.
So I'm talking with Kent James. He's Senior VP at Primoris Renewable Energy, and he was talking a little bit about employment and how it's a little bit difficult to find certain levels of employees to bring into the company. And I asked if young people were interested in solar, and he said that he wasn't really seeing that so much, that it was a lot of skilled tradesmen, coming from other industries like the oil and gas industry might then come over to solar. And it just kind of got me thinking about how we're going to get younger generations maybe interested in solar and just seeing it everywhere. And you and I, we're both living in Ohio. We're outside of Cleveland. And I think that our experience with solar is obviously probably wildly different than what the average person sees in California and things like that. So I was wondering, you personally, you've been with us for how many years now? You've been 2 years on staff?
Yeah, 2 years and almost 2 months. Yeah.
Oh, so exciting. You're here to stay now, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, what was your experience with solar before coming to Solar Power World? Did you see it? Did you know about it?
I mean, not really, other than just what we were taught about it, I guess, in science class and stuff. It was always an elementary school topic that hey, polluting's bad, recycling's good, renewables are good, but we didn't see much of it where I came from, which is Youngstown, Ohio, and Columbiana County, Ohio, and all that. But yeah,
that's the same. When I first started reporting on solar around 2011, and I remember my only experience with it was seeing the solar panels attached to roadside signs, to make sure that their lights can still work in the dark and stuff. And that was it, because there wasn't a lot in Ohio, and there still really isn't that much in Ohio for us to kind of look at.
For sure.
You were telling me the other day that you actually have seen solar kind of nearby where you live.
Yeah, so my girlfriend and I just took a walk around our neighborhood, and I like to take walks around the block and stuff, and I'd never noticed it before, but just a home the street over has a 6-panel system on their roof where there wasn't before. Even up here is kind of surprising to see. We have big wind turbines, but not much solar.
Yeah. I live on the west side of Cleveland, and there's actually 2 businesses that have huge amounts of solar kind of near my house. Whenever I see solar, I'm like, what direction am I traveling? Is that facing south? Is it facing west? Is it getting enough solar generation? Because it is so rare that that's kind of what I get excited about when I see it.
Yeah, for sure.
So I also wanted to bring up, you recently did this really cool video for the Solar Power World YouTube about solar representation in video games. I was wondering if you tell me a little bit about that. How did you first get that idea to look into it?
I've been playing games forever. That's just one of my pastimes. This year, this game that I had been anticipating called Animal Crossing New Horizons came out, which is a kind of like a life simulator. You just live in a community with a bunch of anthropomorphic animals, and you become friends with them and stuff like that. But one of the features is designing the spaces that you occupy. And one of the options, or one of the items in the game, was a solar array, just a 6 or 8 panel prefabricated ground mounted array that you could just put outside. And I was like, that's odd. There's this cutesy little game, and they have a realistically rendered solar system just in the game.
Yeah, and that's kind of your focus area for Solar Power World, is ground mounted solar. Yeah. So you were like, wow, this is really realistic.
Yeah, so I chopped down a few trees and just put it in my backyard. I don't know if it's actually powering anything, but it's there.
That's good, yeah. Are there other games that you had played before that you had seen that at all?
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be like affiliation with science fiction and things like that, and renewables. People want to associate it with futuristic technologies when it's a very present, viable energy source. But I mean, nothing that's like, wow, there's a high frequency of games that have it. Up until recently, I played, what was it, Call of Duty, The Last of Us Part 2, Fortnite. Like these huge, hyper popular games all have solar present in them. And I thought that was super cool to see because even at a base level, they're just aesthetic or like environmental representations. Even if they don't have like a practical use, they're still there.
Yeah, and was it The Last of Us? Is that what the game is called?
Yeah.
Those panels, like those rooftop arrays are so realistic. Like,
Yeah.
and they're just like there, right? I mean, it's just you're running across a roof or something and it just happens to be there.
Yeah, there's like pursuers behind you chasing you, and then you just climb up onto this rooftop, and there was a bunch of panels just up there, and like they look dilapidated because it's the apocalypse. That's what the setting is, but it's still there. And even later in the game, and I wish I had gotten it in, but you come across this house, you go into the basement, flip a switch, and the character you're playing is like, wow, it's powered by solar, and I was like, dang.
Oh, wow. That is really neat, though. We've posted your video, across social media and up online, and a lot of conversations around it are just about that representation in the industry. That if this stuff was just featured more on things, people would get more used to it, especially like for us, Ohio kids who aren't maybe seeing that in real life. We'd be able to see it in video games. So one person suggested the TV show Modern Family. They do the intro of the show, the credits, it's the shot of the house. And if that house just had solar panels on it, think of how many people would have seen that and just been like, yeah, that's normal. Houses have solar panels on them.
Oh yeah. Millions of eyes, even just on like video games, are coming across, I don't know, solar where they probably wouldn't otherwise. Growing up in Youngstown, it was just your typical Rust Belt community where like everyone was living in the shadow of like factories, these former major pollutants. It's still like a major like coal community, but then like, I don't know, what would have happened if I had my hands on something like Astroneer, the game that was prevalently featured in this video that I did, where you actually get to put your hands on solar and place it and power it. The equipment that you're like crafting on this planet to actually like give solar a purpose and not just like be able to, oh, there's a solar panel powering a light, a caution light or something like that on the street.
So do you think if you would have had that, earlier in your life, you would have foregone journalism and went into a solar construction career?
It's hard to say. I've never been a fan of manual labor. So.
Then, well, you found a perfect job with us at Solar Power World.
Exactly.
Well, thanks, Billy. That was really interesting. And I think that's a perfect segue into our interview today with Primoris Renewable Energy. So stay tuned for our interview. Well, let's get into today's Contractors Corner interview. Today, I'm talking with Kent James. He is Senior Vice President for Primoris Renewable Energy, a large-scale construction firm based out of Colorado. So nice to talk with you today, Kent.
Hi, great to talk to you as well.
All right, well, first, tell me a little bit more about Primoris and how solar fits into the company.
Sure. So Primoris, one of the leading providers of specialty contracting services, serving primarily the United States and Canada. A great deal of our focus is on the powers, utilities industry. Our segment here is the renewable energy segment. As mentioned, we're located here in Denver. The Primoris parent company is located in Dallas. We at the renewable energy division, we manage the construction of utility scale solar and battery energy storage systems as they are connected to these utility scale solar plants.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what are the benefits of being part of a public company, and how is your solar business affected by that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, at the end of the day, the solar projects are financial transactions. That's what makes them happen. And being a public company gives us a great advantage. One, we have a really strong balance sheet, but perhaps more importantly, it's a public balance sheet. so we don't have to cross all of the hurdles of a private company's financials, et cetera. We can just simply, send over the SEC filings or whatnot. We can look at credit agency ratings, et cetera. Especially given all of the sort of, European and other out of United States money coming in, this tends to serve us very well. So the investment committees can really wrap their head around exactly who we are, what we are. Generally, this means that, we don't have to put, say, bonds in place, which gives us somewhat of a advantage. I think also, just being part of a large construction company, there gives us a lot of access to capital, potential for growth, the ability to recruit and attract people, which really are almost the number one limiting factor in our business, the number of people required to build these utility projects. So, overall, I think the transparency, the balance sheet, and the ability for people to really understand who we are gives us a great advantage in the marketplace.
What are you seeing with employment? Is it a lot of younger people wanting to get involved in solar? Are there any trends with employment?
It's interesting. I think you see a lot of younger people, but what I think I'm seeing more right now is, at the end of the day, Primoris, we grew up, we've really been an oil and gas pipeline services company. And so what we're seeing, especially in places like West Texas, is a huge number of what I'd call skilled workers, not, just the sort of lowest level craft, but skilled people looking to move their career from something that's a little bit more volatile over into this division. Again, I think it's another thing that gives Primoris somewhat of an upside. We have, thousands of employees on staff at any one time, and so we're seeing a lot of them wanting to shuffle over. Actually, one of our main things is starting to try and recruit from industries other than solar to bring people in here, not only to just get the people, but to bring in some, additional perspectives and ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. So what kind of solar projects are you working on? And you are working kind of all over the country, but do you have like a specific geographic range where you're working?
Yeah, so, we really focus, as of today, really only on the utility scale projects. We look at that as sort of 150 megawatt DC and larger. Truthfully, the bigger the project, the better Primoris, I think, becomes suited. We're built for really big projects in really remote places. We will basically go most places in the country. I mean, we're a client-focused business, so to the extent we can, we'll go where our clients, really want us to go. Today, Texas is really where we lead. Not only are we headquartered there, but there's just so much opportunity there, and we've learned how to be successful there. That said, we're also constructing projects in Nevada, looking at some in California, Arizona, Louisiana, Colorado. So we'll go most anywhere a client really wants us to go. But today, I would say that we're most successful and see a very bright future in Texas.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now we're basically almost a year now with COVID here, and when COVID first hit, was your solar business affected at all? I know, like, working on large-scale projects, you can space yourself out pretty well. What kind of things did you have to do to adapt to COVID?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think any of us knew exactly how to prepare for this back in whenever it started in March, and maybe even less so now that it's rebounded so much. But at the end of the day, we've implemented a huge number of safety practices on our projects, customized plans, specific related protocols with clients. Look, at the end of the day, Primoris' tagline on our emails and our credo is that no business objective is so important that it will be pursued at the sacrifice of safety. And I think this year's really proven that. I mean, you're right in the people in the field, with the exception of safety meetings and such, you're right. They're very spread out, and so we haven't had a huge impact out there. The challenge has truthfully been greater in the offices, and I mean, at the end of the day, we here in the office only are here to support those people in the field. That's our product, if you will, the people in the field doing things. And so, overall, we've had a really great year, Primoris as a company, as well as the renewables division. It's certainly been a challenge in working with people, but we've done a lot. We've donated a lot of money. We've bought the right PPE. We have very specific protocols in place when positive cases arise, and it's been a challenge, but generally our business has been not overly negatively impacted by the current crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you guys have been announcing a lot of new solar contracts this year, so yeah, work continues, and you mentioned you have a lot of business happening in Texas, but what does your pipeline look like going into the future?
Really, we're completely client focused. So we are pretty well, booked for 21, and we're really starting to book business for 22 and 23. I mean, I've been doing solar since I did my first solar project in 2005. I've never seen anything quite like this. Not only has the business matured, but we're really aligning interest with strategic clients over the long term. I mean, over, 3 gigawatt pipelines where we deploy a team. So our pipeline's looking very amazing. I think that, we're proving to our customers and industry that we can be relied on, and we can navigate through all the challenges that are out there, from procurement to the COVID stuff to the getting people. So right now I've never seen a pipeline quite as robust and high probability, if you will, as we rank it into our CRM systems. So the future looks very bright, at least through 23. The crystal ball gets a little more cloudy when you get out to 24, but the foreseeable future is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Is any energy storage included in these projects?
So it's funny you ask that. Pretty much I don't see any projects anymore that don't either have energy storage as part of the immediate contract, or at least some provision in the substation for augmentation later. For example, building an extra bay. Mm-hmm. It's the battery thing's pretty interesting to me. I mean, all of a sudden you see almost any project on it, but we also have clients who have not yet wrapped their head around how to finance it, how to do it, and how to really mitigate the risk. It's the battery thing reminds me a lot of what PV looked like back in whenever it was, 2006, when we'd install it, $8 a watt with 140 watt modules.
Right.
It's kind of the Wild West in it, but I very rarely anymore see a project come across our plate that doesn't have energy storage at least mentioned in it or accounted for later or something of the sort.
Is that more of your customers kind of thinking about it, or are you suggesting things like that?
No, it's almost always the customers thinking about it. I think that I'm hearing from several of our customers that it's becoming more and more difficult to finance projects without some sort of a consideration for batteries. That being said, it's so brand new that it changes constantly, and I still think there's a lot of disalignment in what it costs, how to use it, how to work it. On the projects we build, the battery scope that we take on, the construction side of it, is pretty minor, but I think moving forward we're going to see batteries on all big projects, and we're also going to see a lot of the large projects getting retrofitted with batteries to basically, fully utilize that interconnect, right?
Yeah.
More kilowatt hours over more time.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear that it seems like you said, it is like the Wild West, but it's finally picking up steam, it seems like.
It is. We're good at managing the Wild West in the solar coaster, We've been doing it a long time.
Right. Do you feel like there is still a rush to get that larger ITC amount through 2021, or have tax incentives kind of become less important?
Well, I think that the ITC and tax incentives are really somewhat of a two-edged sword. I think that, one end, there's a lot of financial advantage to it. On the other side, it definitely makes deals much more complicated. It brings in a lot of different players into it. I'm seeing a lot of projects that have safe harbored or have done other mechanisms to ensure that they capture the full 30%. I'm seeing a bit of a rush for people to safe harbor, the incentive for this year. I mean, all of that said, I think that there's such a demand for solar that these things continue to get financed either way, and the cost keeps coming down, right? So while I would tell you that there's not a finance person out there that wouldn't tell you the ITC is really important and people are rushing to get it, I think we're learning more and more and more how to make sure the economics work, whether it's there or not. And as opposed to it being fundamental to a transaction, it starts to look more like upside. And that's it's very interesting. Look, we've had to deal with since I've been in this, ITCs and 1603s. They come, they go. You never really know what it's going to be there. And so I think that the finance people have really learned how to, appropriately address it, appropriately, value it into the deal, and ensure that, most of their projects are able to go, either way. I mean, that being said, though, finance people are always going to make sure they, get as much additional money into a deal as they can.
Definitely. With the safe harbor stuff, how is your company affected by that at all? Are you having to hold stuff in a warehouse, buy it at a certain point? Is that affecting you at all?
No, it doesn't really impact us that much. I would say the much bigger impact on the business is the tariffs, right? I mean, finance people like certainty, right? And at the end of the day, right now, maybe it changes, but we know what's going to happen with the ITC. You're going to get X amount in this year and X amount in next year, and they've figured out how to deal with it. The tariffs, on the other hand, that's a much more difficult thing to deal with when, bifacials, they either have a tariff or they don't have a tariff. I mean, it's on a 500 megawatt deal, a 5-cent swing on modules, that's an enormous amount of money. And so for me, that's really the bigger challenge, is the uncertainty relative to tariffs, relative to things like the executive order. And that, I think, impacts us as the EPC a little bit more because, the commodity price is always changing. I mean, you sign a project, you try and mitigate tariff risk within that project as much as you can and sort of either shed or share the risk. But at the end of the day, price of something goes up because of a tariff, it's a big deal. And then you have everybody trying to say, oh, well, the tariff steps down in February, and therefore, we're not going to start taking modules until February, which really starts to condense schedules. And our business really isn't based on volume. That's not what's a risk to us. It's velocity that's a risk to an EPC. You can build a gigawatt project if you have the right amount of time, but the more you condense it, the more people you get out there, the higher the velocity, the worse it is. And if you can't get equipment because there's a tariff and therefore have to increase your velocity, that exposes us to a way different kind of risk than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Well, besides the tariffs and uncertainty around that, what other trends are you seeing in large-scale solar? How has, installation evolved over your 10 years in the industry?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, one, we've definitely gotten much better at it. I mean, it's interesting. We work for a large company, and literally, we can take our means and methods down to the number of steps a person takes to install a module. And while that seems trivial to reduce one step, when you reduce one step across 2 million modules, it's real money, right? It's real efficiency. So one thing I'm seeing is just these great gains in means and methods. Efficiency, the ability to build these, the fact that we've built enough of them and so we know what to look for. We're much more robust in the planning phase. And so all of those things have really gone to changing the velocity. I mean, I say it all the time, it took me 9 years in the solar business of doing very well to build as many megawatts as we build in, a day or a week now. Because, at the end of the day, these big utilities, it's just an outdoor assembly line. And we've really built that. Now, larger modules have impacted that, better thought out ways to install tracker and all of that have all increased that efficiency. What's brought it back down on the other side is, we no longer go build these big giant squares on perfectly flat, ag land or something like that. The projects are almost always, challenging terrain, challenging subsurface conditions, irregular shapes, very long, stretched out projects, again, as opposed to one, big square. Because, at the end of the day, logistics, you got to think if you have 300 people on a site and you have to get half of them, at 10 miles an hour, 4 miles away, you can really start to think how that has an incredible impact on how efficient you can be. I mean, we call them the ghost hours, right? The hours that it takes from the time a person shows up, goes through a safety briefing, and then actually gets to the place where they're performing work. So, the means and methods have gotten crazy. The equipment, the way it's delivered has all gotten much better. I think you can all see that in how much the price has dropped over the last, 10 years, and much more so over the last couple of years. But again, the challenging sites have somewhat mitigated that, and the technology people are always trying to catch up and get out in front of that. So it's an always changing and ever dynamic situation.
Yeah. What other improvements could be made to the solar industry that could make all of your jobs a little bit easier?
I mean, again, I think it'd go back to what I said before. The huge advantage solar has is that the fuel source, the thing that drives it, is pretty well known, right? I mean, I say to people all the time, if the sun's not shining, IRR is not your problem. But finance, everybody, we like certainty. We like to know, what's going to happen with these regulations, what's going to happen with tariffs, what's going to happen with all of these things. And solar, as it's matured, it was a teenager last year. Now we're kind of getting into be a young adult. The business is maturing a lot, but it also brings in a different level of investor, a different level of business professional who even more want certainty, right? I mean, like I said before, back in 2010, it was the Wild West, right? I mean, modules would go half price. It was crazy, but we want certainty. It doesn't really, I mean, it matters what things cost, but I'd rather know what something costs and pay more than having to constantly be, mitigating risk based on these fluctuations in things that are completely out of our control. We like to say that, we really deliver certainty of outcome, and the less certainty there is in things that are out of our control makes it more difficult to live up to that standard and that value proposition.
Yeah. What are some immediate plans for Primoris, and what are you hoping to accomplish in the next few years?
That's another great question. I mean, at the end of the day, we are 100% focused on our people, on making sure that they're safe, on making sure that they have visibility to move up and continue to grow. We see the marketplace continuing to grow, and having those people, those skilled positions, those supervisors, those site managers, those superintendents that have come up through the field and really know what they're doing. So I would say that our ability to facilitate advancement, our ability to make sure our people are happy, most importantly that they're safe, that this is a place they want to be, is really our focus. Because, I think that always you'll be able to ramp up to get wire, and you'll be able to ramp up to get this, and you'll be able to ramp up to get that. But none of those things matter if you don't have the people out in the field that are able to go install it. And importantly, sort of that younger generation, that they're learning how all of this works. Because the limiting factor is not the craft or any of those. The limiting factor is the supervisors, the superintendents, those people that manage crews. And so our real focus is ensuring, we look at the world as the number of teams we can put out there, which is the amount of product we can put into the world. And we need to continue to feed that machine so we have competent teams moving into the future at those higher level foreman, superintendent, project manager levels.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I'll be watching for sure. And yeah, thanks for talking to me today, Ken. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everything you guys do to support the business. I think that the role you play is incredibly important to make sure the word gets out and let us all share and be knowledgeable about information out there. So thank you for what you guys do, and I appreciate the opportunity.
This has been another edition of Contractors Corner. Join us each month as editor Kelly Pickerel chats with solar installers across the country. Thanks for listening to the Solar Power World podcast. Visit us online to hear more great podcasts, view industry videos, and read our great editorial content. SolarPowerWorldOnline.com. See you back here next month.